Hello, my name is Frederik Steinmetz for cgtutsplus.com, and today we'll be creating this. So here's the scene we're going to be creating. First of all, this is the underwater part, and it's being composited in After Effects. And we'll be exporting some render passes for After Effects in order to get the depth of field and also the depth of field while passing through the water. So this is the underwater part. We got some light rays coming through. Here's some volumetric lighting. We got the mist in the background, so our second post is already much less visible. And this is the overwater part where we'll have displacement. And also I put in a tiny bit of a lens blur. It's not very realistic, but it did look better, so I left it in anyways. So the overall idea is to have the camera pass through the water surface without leaving a hideous like so. If I navigate through here, you'll see that the water surface is a straight line, and we want to camouflage that line while passing through the water. And to do that, we're gonna render out a depth pass with Blender and use it in After Effects to apply a lens blur. Let's just begin creating this scene. You can see there's a little starfish just for show, a little sea urchin, starfish, a couple of shells, and some posts with a texture on them. Now let's start off by creating this starfish. I'm going to create a new scene, and I'll save it. Okay, let's just press Shift A and add a circle. And the circle should just have 6 of those. Press Tab to get into edit mode and extrude these faces out. Now this does not have to be precise unless you want a totally regular starfish. And extrude these in by alt-clicking on this, I'm sorry, let me just demonstrate that again. By alt-clicking on this edge loop, you'll select the entire loop. If you extrude by pressing E and S to scale it in, never mind. Works anyways. Okay, W, remove doubles, 6 vertices. Now we've destroyed the edge loop. Okay, this is because there's a gap in here between the faces. Those are no longer connected, so this is not an edge loop anymore. So it's a good idea to extrude this in before the edge loop is destroyed, because otherwise you'd have to select all those edges by hand. Let's scale this in even more and extrude, and Alt-M to merge at the center, and press Tab to get out of edit mode, press Ctrl-2, and we already have a starfish. Let's press Tab, get into edit mode, extrude this out, down, and let's Alt-click on this and Shift-click on the middle, and just pull this up a little. Okay, now to get over here, smooth, and you see some hideous black stuff, and that's because of the orientation of the normal. This normal is pointing inwards or outwards, and this one normal is pointing the opposite way. And Blender will try to make a smooth gradient between, let's say this is 45 degrees, this is 45 degrees, it will make a smooth gradient. But since this is 45 and this is 135, this will become a real weird black thing once you set it smooth. Easy solution, tab into edit mode, double press A to select everything, and then press Ctrl N, and all the normals will be pointing outside. Now if you want your star to have smaller arms, you can always press Ctrl R, insert a loop cut here, and pull it in until the arm is closer, so you'll crease this edge here. And you can also, once you clicked to confirm, if you move it around by pressing G, you'll see you have your arm distorted. You can get around that by pressing Ctrl E and then select Edge Slide, and this way your vertices will slide along the edge that's already there. but I don't need this. I like my starfish this way. It works fine. And while we're at it, let's just texture the guy. What I did, I created a new material called the starfish. It's really nothing too fancy. Let's create a texture and call it noise, but we won't use noise because in animation noise tends to uh, form mistakes. If you move the camera slightly, your noise might get offset a lot. So the easiest way around that is just to use clouds and bump their size down to 0. There you go, you have now noise as well. But we don't want the noise to affect the color, just the normals. And then add a new texture and call this rings. And we'll use the ramp and also use a blend texture and make it radial. Now we have, make it spherical. Now we have a dot, and this white is on the outside, on the inside, and this black is on the outside. I'll change the alpha, and I'll make this a lot more orangey. Okay, I'll control click here to add another one and make this even darker. You can go nuts with the colors, it doesn't really matter. Just control click to insert new what do you call them? Well, lines. And you can do this as detailed as you want. Sometimes it's a good idea to duplicate them so that you can create more distinct rings. And actually I'll spare you the details of this. Let me just make sure you understood the concept, because well, per ring you need two of these handles, and you can just place the rings in every fashion that you can imagine, just so that your starfish will have these rings in the end. You can make some of them transparent if you like, um, and you can also, of course, use different starfish that you can find online. Let's just check how our rings are looking right now. And to test, I always like to have a lamp hemi. It renders fast and you don't need to worry about even lighting. Okay, there we go. Looks like a very wet starfish, but that's okay. Let's just let's put the intensity down to 0.1 and the hardness to 10. That's my sort of standard setting for organic stuff. And there you go. That looks like a starfish from underneath, but I'm not going to pay too much attention to this detail, because you guys feel free to do that at home. You just get this inner circle a lot wider. Never mind. Sometimes if I don't know what I'm doing exactly, I just color those magenta and color this one yellow, bright green or something, so I can check whether or not I'm using the correct settings. And you can see it seems to be repeating itself towards the middle. Never mind. This has to do as my little starfish. Okay, let's move this out of the way. Press Shift-C to center my cursor, 7 to look at it from above. And actually, let's press H to hide it. Shift-A, Mesh, UV, Icosphere. I like the Icosphere better than the UV sphere because it's much more regular. Now let's press Y to get into the wireframe view. Select those and press S and the Z and 0. This will make sort of the bottom of our sea urchin. And press B to box select these vertices and move them up a bit. A, B, and move those up again. And this is going to be the body of our sea urchin. And let's create a particle system and call this sea urchin. And it's going to be a hair type, and you can immediately see there's a lot of hair going on. Random, even distribution, random, and the normals should be a lot less. The thing about this sea urchin is if we scale this down, the normal value will stay the same. That means if we scale this down, the hair length will not respond to the scaling. You can see as soon as I confirm, it will click again. So it will resize again. So if you're doing this, I can only recommend that you do most of your scene until you're sure that this is the right size for your sea urchin, and then you tinker with the normal settings. All I need is some randomness, and also a sea urchin is going to be attached to the surface with this part here, so we don't need hairs growing out of it. So what we'll do is we'll Control Tab into edit into the weight paint mode, and over here we have the tools. We'll just select Add and Paint. Make the strength a little harder. We can press F to increase the size and Shift F to increase the feathering. Okay, now just paint wherever you want the subtract wherever you want the hairs to appear, and say subtract wherever you don't. Oops. Of course, the red part is fully weighted and the blue part is no weight at all. So now we have to tell Blender to use these exact weights to distribute the hair, and we can go to the particle settings and go down to the vertex groups and check for the density, the group. The group, if you press the Control Tab to get into weight painting, it will automatically create a vertex group for you. You can also call this hair density for clearance sake, and you can see it's updated. If you press negative on that, you can see wherever it's red there will be no hair, but we don't want that, of course. There's still some hair poking out down here. I think that might be because of the randomness. No, that's actually because of the fuzziness of our weight paint. So if you press Tab, get into edit mode, Y to get into wireframe, and select those bottom vertices, then go over here to the object data. You have your vertex group. Press Tab, get into edit mode, make sure the weight is 0, and press Assign. So now there should be no hairs. There should be no hairs. No hairs at the bottom. Okay, this will be our sea urchin. What I'd like to do is to get two materials on the little guy. One is going to be the urchin itself, and I made some tests, and this should be a really, really dark material, and the specular should be sorry, the specular should be 0.1 and the hardness 10 again, but even decrease the specular color, because this is supposed to be mostly black. It's not really shining through the hair. Then plus to get a second material on the sea urchin. Press the little 2 here to make this a single user. Otherwise, if we edit the material, we'll also edit the urchin original material. And call this urchin spikes. Okay, for the spikes, we'll need strand settings. And I like to use Blender units because if you move the camera and you have the Blender's units unchecked, the size of the hair will stay the same, because this will be the size in pixels. This way it's Blender units. Of course, one Blender unit is huge. You can see here the dimensions of the entire starfish are 0.6 by 0.7 blender units. So if the hair is 1 blender unit wide, that's going to be one big something spike. So let's take this down to 0.02, I guess is a good size, and 0.015. It's probably still way too big. And the width fade, we'll use that. And also this says negative makes the strand spiky. So of course we want spiky strands because this is a sea urchin. And go over to the textures panel. I like having this arranged like this, so you can manipulate your texture settings and material settings and still have a good look at both. Don't have to click back and forth. And if you, just a quick tip, if you don't know how to set up Blender's interface, there's always a little triangle on the bottom that you can pull, and you'll duplicate your window. If you don't like it, you pull it in the other direction and you can merge windows. Okay. I explained this to a friend of mine. He said it's like a Chinese puzzle game. I guess he's right, but you get used to it fairly fast. Now, this is fairly standard for hair. I've already demonstrated this in my microcosm tutorial, but this time it's going to have a little twist, but just a tiny. Let's go to strand view here and take down the transparency to 0. And let's not get this influenced by the color, but rather by the alpha. Influence the alpha rather than the color. And we still have our Hemi. Let's just test this real quick. Well, you can see it's oops. It's not great, but it's a start, and I guess we'll deal with this later. Let's just you could see in my picture, sorry, that one, that the we call them sea hedgehog. That the sea urchin had some yellow spikes that were actually thicker. So let's create those as well. We'll add a new particle system. Let's call this bigger spikes. And let's go to hair, of course. There we go. We don't need that many. Let's just make this 300 or something. Take down the normal. Again, this is only for... Ah, okay, I know what I did wrong. This is only for testing, so toy around with the distinct normal settings later on, but now we have longer spikes. Thing is, I put the render material to be the material number 1. Of course, the strand material that we edited is material number 2. So if we render this again, I'll pause, you can see it looks a lot worse. The alpha blend that we created is actually going from left to right rather than along the strand. So let's change that. In the texture settings, you can say this blend texture is along the generate coordinates, which is the coordinates from the object, but we want this to be the strand for the input value. And you can see those hairs are way too thick, even with the settings of 0.02. So let's take this down 10 times. And also, while we're at it, create a third urchin material, urchin big spikes. See, this is what happens when you forget to press the little 2. You'll edit both materials. It happens all the time. but I guess someday I'll get used to that. It's not that it doesn't make sense, it just happens to me. And let's change the big spikes. Let's change the render material to 3. And this one needs to get a second texture actually. And another blend texture. Again, of course, the input will be the strands, and this time it will affect the color. And let's get the ramp color to very dark gray. Push this over, control click here to add another one, and make this a dark yellow. Also adjust the alpha, and this one here, let's just pull up the alpha and move this over here. So you can see it'll have a band near to the tip. So I'll put this one aside, and we'll fine-tune it once we're done modeling the scene. I'll move it to the Alt 2 layer, and let's take up the extremely tedious and mind-numbing task of modeling 2 poles. I'll add in the cylinder, scale it down, set, scale it up, set smooth, and we got a pole. Let's duplicate this one. Actually, let's Alt duplicate it. Alt D duplicates it, and the good thing is if I make any changes to this one, the other one will be changed as well. So if I decide later on, hey, I need to do that to both poles, I can easily do that. Same goes for material. So let's add a new material, call this wood, and I'll use a wood texture. Let me check if I have one. Just select texture here, call this wood again, and go to image or movie and open a wood texture. Let's take the weathered wood. Of course, wood doesn't have a spec like that, so I'll take this really low 0.05 and 10. Now let's also affect the normals. You can affect that quite a bit because, as you can see, our weathered wood texture has a lot of huge gaps. I tried modeling the gaps, but it didn't give very nice results. I think if you really want to model gaps as small as these, you'd have to use a really high poly mesh. So I did not do that, and I'll choose the projection to be tube. I guess since this is a tube, this should work with a projection. Well, of course not. Let's check the projection to be a flat. Doesn't work either. Let's change this back to tube and press R, Z, and then 180 degrees. I don't get it. Let's quickly unwrap this. Let's get the weathered wood here, and press 1 to get into front view, and press U to get a cylinder projection. There we go, cylinder projection. And let's rotate this 90 degrees, press S, and the reason mine is snapping like that, we can check the textured view from the camera. There we go. That should work. The reason mine is snapping like that is because I enabled a setting that I really like. It's a constraint to image bounds. You have to be careful with it. As you saw, it snaps, and sometimes if you move something around or scale something up, you might leave a little gap, but most of the times it's really helpful. So another thing about normal maps is if you have a gap like this, Don't put it to the edge because people will not get fooled by this. The normal map doesn't change the rim of your model. It only changes the surface. So if you have a huge gap, I mean, this is not that bad, but if it was something that had a zigzag line here and you put it right in the edge, like a bark or something, your viewers would not be fooled because this would actually be a, well, you could see the clear line, even though it should be jagged, the straight line. Okay, you can see those are offset with their rotation, which is good. They don't look alike. And let's offset them a little with this as well. Let's press Shift A and add a cube. Let's go to top view and go over here, press S and Shift Y, which will scale it along the X and the Z axis. S and Z will scale it along the Z, of course. And now S and Y will make it thicker. Okay, that's one plank, and we press Alt G and Alt G here. We make it centered, and we can now use those planks. I'll use an array modifier for this because it's more elegant than duplicating objects. Add modifier array. Oops, that was bevel, but we need that as well. Array. Thing is about the bevel modifier, you might want to use that after the array, and this is just for computing reasons. If you have the more vertices this initial model has, the more vertices need to be calculated each time you hit the count button. But if you have only those 8 vertices and you array them, put them in an array, and then calculate the bevel, that's a lot less computing time. It doesn't matter with 4 planks, of course, just something to keep in mind. Whenever you have a stack of modifiers and you have a choice, I'd recommend to put the array modifier first. Let's change the relative offset a bit more, and that should be some decent planks, except for the bevel modifier is way too much. Let's put this down to 0.01. That was a little bit too little. 0.03. That should do. And yeah, now we got planks. Let's apply the same wood material to the planks. By the way, I forgot something. Wood. In these, we have the textures, we have the UV coordinates, but it's still projection onto a tube. So let's just use the UV coordinates instead, and we'll be fine. Now let's make us a single user and call this wood planks. And well, let's not use the UV. Let's just use the generated, and cube projection. Okay, the planks won't be visible that much. If it's really bad bothering us, we can go in later and change it again. But they're mostly there for the shadow. Let's take the camera, press G and middle mouse and zoom out a little, just so we have our scene still in the entire camera view. Add a plane and make it larger, and call this water surface. Okay, this we'll call planks, and this one we'll call pole. And this one also pole. Okay, this water surface. Of course, right now it's flat. Doesn't give us much to work with. So let's add a few modifiers. First modifier will be a subdivision surface. We'll use the simple subdivision because all we need is more vertices. We don't need it smoothed out or anything. Let's change this up to 6 and the render to 6 as well. Now let's give this a material. Oops. Call this water. And to this material we'll add a clouds texture. And we won't render the clouds texture. We just need it for this modifier here. Add modifiers, displace. For the displace you need a texture, and there you go. That's awesome looking water. Set this to smooth and set the strength way down. Well, you can toy around with that. Whatever strength suits you. But the important thing is, let's Shift A and create a new empty and call this input. I use empties as input a lot, so in order to group them, I'll always call them input underscore and then their purpose, input displace. And if you grab this modifier here and change the control to an object, you can choose the input. And now if I move this around, you can see the water surface is moving with it. The cloud is based on a fractal algorithm, the cloud's texture. That means this way it has a direction, this way it has a direction. If I rotate this, it has a rotation. But if I move this up, you can see that the fractal algorithm actually applies in 3D space. So if I move this up here, you can see it doesn't have a direction, but still it's changing. So this is comparable to the After Effects evolution settings in the fractal noise. So if I move this along the normals, which point up in this part, we just see a diffuse movement of the water surface, which is exactly what we want. But we'll animate this later. And while we're at it, let's generate the seafloor. Let's press Shift A again, add a plane, scale it up, and call this seafloor. And I have this awesome texture from CG Textures. I cannot apply this, supply this, I'm sorry, supply, yeah, I guess. But you can find something similar online, I'm sure. Let's call this sand, and this again is a file. Open and textures, sandstone, the beach. Okay, the beach is a wavy texture. We can use it in order to displace the sand a little as well. Now you would get much better results with the displacement than if you just use the displacement modifier. You'll get some unexpected results because it will take the grayscale, or actually it will take the RGB values of your sand texture and use them to displace the surface. So if you have a sand grain over here, it will pinch a hole. So one way to get better results in this is go into Photoshop and increase the contrast, and where you see sand grains or something, delete them. I'm not going to do this right now. I'll leave this up to you. And one good idea is to add a subdivision surface modifier right after this to smooth it out again. I'm going to just leave it at these settings. I don't want to put too much effort into details that aren't that important for the purpose of the tutorial. So let's just take this down and take the seafloor down as well. And the color will be overridden by the material. by the texture, so we can give this all a color that is meaningful to us, and we can distinguish a lot easier between our different materials. Okay, this is the sea floor, intensity down to 0.1 and hardness to 10. We should also set the sand to influence the normals. And again, if you go into Photoshop here, you can greatly increase the normals using the contrast using the curves, and you get some more grainy look. But I'll just figure or assume for this moment that you know how to use the curves in Photoshop or GIMP, same thing. Well, at least when it comes to that. Good. If you press Shift F, you can navigate through your camera. You can look through your camera. Mouse will scroll it in, zoom in, zoom out. G will move it around, and so on. It's a very handy feature. And if you press G and middle mouse button, you can move the camera back and forth real fast, which is great for navigating inside your scene. So I'll place the camera over here. And since in the end we'll only be moving the camera from underwater out of the water, see if we don't get into edit mode, it will the alt duplicate won't follow the parent. But so let's select both. But if we would have gotten into edit mode and scaled them, they'd both react. Okay. Just a quick hint for duplicated. What do you call that? I don't know. For the alt D. It's extremely helpful for screws. Because if you place like 20 screws in an object and you realize, oh, I didn't want flathead screws, I want cross screws, then just change one and you're good to go. Also material-wise, if you give the entire thing a new material, everything else will update. It's a really handy feature. But enough about screws. Let's, oh, by the way, I just pressed the division key on the numpad to isolate this object from the others, which is really handy if you want to isolate it and not have the entire scene distracting you. So what I want to do now is actually let's go to an entirely different layer. Press 2 on your keyboard, go into this layer, press Shift C, and for now let's press N and T to get these out of the way. And press Shift A to add a circle, and again I only need 6 vertices. Try keeping this as low poly as possible. We can always add subdivision surface later on. So let's go into front view, press E to extrude, move this out, press E to extrude, and scale it in. And let's create sort of the shape of a barnacle. And duplicate this, Shift D, scale it down, and up here, move this through, extrude and scale in. And now we can make a face out of these, make a face out of these, and use those two and press V in order to split them. Okay, that was the wrong split. Okay, that was the right one. Okay, you can split up a vertex by pressing the V key. That again was the wrong split. I don't know how to influence that. I don't know. Split them again and merge them at last. This one, Alt M, merge at last. And actually that was stupid. Where was I getting with this? Right. Normally I really don't like triangles, but I'm trying to keep this thing here low poly, so I'll use triangles anyways, because this one is going to be a particle and it's going to be duplicated quite some times. So scale it up, and this one scale it, extrude and scale it inwards, extrude again and go move it down. We'll leave it at this, and I don't really like this, but I don't think we'll be getting very close to this. If you want to, of course, you can make this look nicer, but for all intents and purposes, this should do. I'm pressing Ctrl 2 in order to add a subdivision surface modifier with the order of 2, but be careful, the number you press only refers to the display. It will, if you press Ctrl 6, it will show up in the display as a modifier with 6 steps, but it will still render as 2. So you gotta be careful there. And let's press Ctrl N, and this one AA, Ctrl N. Now we'll have those smooth and the normals calculated correctly. Let's all click on this loop and delete the edges so that we have fewer vertices to deal with. And E again, Alt M, and say at center so we can't see through this. And extrude this down, and F to create a face. So, okay, this is not the world's most beautiful barnacle. I'm sure with a little effort you can build a nicer one, but this is just decoration for our scene, so I'm not going to use much more effort. And let's press Ctrl J and join these two objects because they're going to be a single barnacle, and it's a lot easier to keep them in place. Press Shift select all of them and press Ctrl. Sorry, that was Ctrl J. Press Ctrl G in order to get them into a group. And it is okay. You can rename groups under the object mode. Okay, this will be important later on. You may have noticed that there was a cut in the distortion of the little guys. Don't worry about that, it's not very important. I actually had to redo this later on in the tutorial. The only important thing is that they belong to a group. And that was the first part of this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you watch the rest, where I will begin to texture the scene and continue to create some decorations for the scene. I hope to see you next time. Bye.